Okay, ready?
Yeah. Let's start.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Dennehy. I'm the vice chair of the Consolidated Plan Advisory Board, or we refer to it as CPAB. We're going to do a quick roll call to confirm attendance. When I call your name, please unmute yourself and say present. Rich Thiesing?
Not here.
Not present. Okay. Sarah Burns? Not present. Eileen Gonzalez?
Here.
Present. Victoria Barba?
Present.
Dr. Brenda Campbell?
Are you here, Dr. Campbell? I thought I saw your name.
I see her. She's muted though.
Okay.
Oh, she's waving her hand though. I think that's a present. Okay.
Okay.
And then Patrick Batten.
I'm present.
Okay. Thank you. Your attendance has been noted. Also joining us today are economic development staff, including Michelle Morano and Leonardo Alarcon. Before we get into today's agenda, I'm going to call on Leo to run down some of the guidelines for today's meeting.
Okay, great. Thanks, Peter. Also want to make sure Monica Hardman is also noted as city staff. She's the assistant deputy director, and she was introduced at last month's meeting. I think we were having technical difficulties and you weren't able to access, but welcome to the meeting, Monica. So I'll run down some just kind of parameters for the meeting. To the CPAB members, please note the buttons on your Teams meeting bar that pops up when you move the mouse. The camera icon is to activate your video. The microphone is to mute and unmute. Please remember to stay muted when you are not talking and to unmute yourself when you speak. You will also see the chat window button. Please keep your chat window open at all times, as you will be using the chat to signal when you would like to speak. When wanting to make a motion, second a motion, or participate in a discussion, please type speak in the chat box and Peter will call on you in the order entered. Please refrain from using the meeting chat for anything other than signaling that you would like to speak in order to comply with the Brown Act. Thank you. Okay. Back to you, Peter.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Since there have been some changes to our board since our last meeting, we will have some board member announcements by city staff to address the changes.
Thank you, Peter. I guess I should introduce myself again. Leonardo Alarcon, Community Development Project Specialist. So yeah, there was a couple of changes to the board. Valerie Brown, her term has expired, so she is no longer on the board. We appreciate her contributions in her 4 years with us, and she was great. But now we have two new board members, Dr. Brenda Campbell for Council District 4 and Patrick Batten representing Council District 5. So if you guys wouldn't mind introducing yourselves, giving a brief bio, that would be great. You go first, Patrick.
Okay. Patrick Batten. I live here in Rancho Bernardo. Married to my wife, Kelly, for 24 years now. We have 4 children that range from 10 years old to 18. So it'll be an interesting year with a elementary school, middle school, high school senior, and now a college freshman at San Diego State, all studying in the same household with online learning. I'm a member of the Rancho Bernardo Community Council, Municipal Advisory District. I volunteer my time here in the community, from coaching Little League for my son to used to coach soccer for my daughters till they got too good. But just happy to be here, long time, participant in local government. And so, looking forward for this opportunity to serve the community and San Diego as a whole.
Thank you. Dr. Campbell, are you there? No. See, Peter, do you have the option of unmuting her?
Oh, I'll give it a shot. She's raising her hand again. So hold on a sec. Let me see if I can. Sorry. Where'd it go? Where is it? RB? No, that's not it. +5. I'm looking for it. I apologize. I'm looking for it.
It's okay. I think.
Where is it? Where is she? She keeps moving. No, that's Rick Bollinger. That's BC. Hold on.
Yeah, it's okay. I think we'll just move on.
Brenda. It doesn't look like I can. When I click on her name, there's no option to mute. It actually doesn't show her as muted now either. It shows her as outside this organization. So anyway, just so you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if Brenda wants to, if she wants to type up something, I'll read it. Sorry. All right. I guess we'll move on to item 4, approval of the CPAB virtual meeting minutes from May 13th, our last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review it? Okay. Is there a motion? New members may abstain. I was there and I read them, so I'll make a motion that we approve them. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll now take a vote, and I'll call on your name, and you will respond out loud with yay, nay, or abstain. Rich Thiesing, not present. Sarah Burns, I guess not present. Eileen Gonzalez.
Here. I mean, yes.
Yay. Yay.
Yay.
Victoria Barba.
Yay.
Yay. Brenda Campbell is going to abstain, and Patrick Batten will abstain. My vote is yay.
So that means we'll just keep these minutes for record. They won't be official minutes because we don't have a quorum on the minutes.
Okay. So now we'll move on to non-agenda and agenda public comments. And I believe Leo said that there was at least one.
Yes, I have one public comment. So this is a non-agenda public comment. The name is an anonymous resident. The subject is, where was it? Well, this is just in reference to the CPAB. The comment is low-income renters have no justice in San Diego. If an owner violates state, federal, or criminal laws, there is no way to enforce them. Legal briefs for small claims are over $1,000, too expensive. All agencies do nothing, including legal aid, that only do evictions. In fact, when an owner obstructs justice and performs a felony, local government does nothing. Courts side with owners despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This contributes to homelessness. San Diego takes advantage of its poor and their lack of resources. This is criminal to not enforce renters' rights, laws, or give people a way to protect themselves from abuse. And that is the end of the comments.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
we will now have a presentation for our action item regarding the analysis of impediments to fair housing.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle Morano. I'm a community development coordinator with the Economic Development Department, and I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen so you can see the presentation as I'm going over it. So bear with me. Oops, there we go. All right, is everyone seeing a presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Yay, okay. Well, it's my pleasure to give you an update on the process that we undertook to update the San Diego Regional Analysis of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice for the 5-year period that starts in fiscal year 21, but calendar year 20, and concludes in 2025. And what we'll be asking you to do today is to make a recommendation to the City Council that they approve the regional analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. And we'll be going over what that looks like. So today, I just want to go over a few of our objectives. I want to provide just a little bit of a background and a purpose for the analysis of impediments. We did give the CPAB a presentation in September and November of last year, but just because it has been a considerable amount of time since we've talked about it, and we do have some new members, just wanted to go over that and review that a little bit. The definitions and requirements of fair housing. Wanted to summarize the engagement and outreach efforts that we participated in over the last year in order to get community input on this document. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight some of the findings, the impediments that were identified, and the recommended actions that the region will be taking in order to address those barriers. So just as a background, the City of San Diego is an entitlement jurisdiction, which means that we receive federal funds primarily for community development block grants, emergency solutions grants, HOPWA, and the HOME program. And so part of the obligation of the city in order to receive those funds is that we're required to certify that we will administer those grants in accordance with the Federal Fair Housing Act, and that the city will affirmatively further fair housing. We are part of a region that also has 17 other jurisdictions that receive funds, and so we are completing this update and analysis as a regional effort because they too have this obligation to affirmatively further fair housing. Part of what that means, part of affirmatively furthering fair housing, means that we prepare an analysis of impediments to identify some barriers that may occur that prevent individuals from having a choice in where they would like to live. We need to also take appropriate actions to overcome those impediments. We also sign a certification each year. When we receive our grants from the federal government, our city official, whether that's the mayor or the designee by the mayor, we are certifying that we will be taking these actions. And then we have to maintain records in order to document to HUD that we are affirmatively furthering fair housing and addressing the impediments that are identified in this document. Part of our regional effort, and that looks like there's a little bit of a wonky formatting there, so my apologies, but these are the organizations and jurisdictions that are participating in the regional analysis with us. So it's 17 cities within the region as well as the County of San Diego. The City of San Diego is the lead in this effort, and so we have engaged on behalf of this conglomeration, a consultant in order to assist us with the preparation of the document itself. The purpose of the analysis of impediments, it's really our opportunity to present a demographic profile of the county, including the City of San Diego. We assess the extent of the housing needs among specific income groups, and we evaluate the availability of a range of housing choice for residents. The analysis of impediments examines the nature and extent of housing discrimination, and its focus is to identify barriers that may prevent equal access to housing and to develop solutions to mitigate or remove those impediments. Some of the elements of the analysis of impediments are demographic data of the population in our region, the availability of housing stock and practices in the housing market, for rental and for sale, as well as lending patterns in our community. There's also an examination of existing public policies with regard to zoning, land use policies, and that is also a regional look. And then there's an analysis of fair housing, our fair housing profile. So the document itself includes what type of complaints have been received throughout the region, and it's broken down by city. And as well as testing results, we do conduct fair housing testing throughout the region. They're called random paired fair housing tests. And sometimes we focus on specific protected classes. Other times the tests are based on complaints. And I can answer questions about those later on. And then where there's also a an effort to assist persons with limited English proficiency, and so that's identified throughout the document as well. So what is fair housing? I know we've talked about this before, but just as a review, fair housing describes a condition in which individuals of similar income levels in the same housing market have a like range of choice available to them, regardless of a protected class status. So basically, it prohibits discrimination in housing because of a protected class status. And so when I talk about protected class, what does that mean? Well, equal access to housing is a right that's protected by both federal and state law, and fair housing laws allow individuals to obtain the housing of their choice free from illegal discrimination. So in the U.S., these laws are, and I'm missing my little notes. Here we go. It's against the law to treat people differently when trying to buy, rent, sell, finance, or insure a home. And the Federal Fair Housing Act ensures all Americans can live in the housing of their choice that they can afford. And I think that's really important, that distinction. So with the Federal Fair Housing Act, really protected classes were defined back in 1866 with the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which prohibited discrimination in housing based on race. But there were no enforcement provisions in that Civil Rights Act. So it took almost over 100 years later for the federal government to establish the Federal Fair Housing Act, which identified 4 protected classes in 1968: race, color, religion, and national origin. And then in 1974, gender was added as a protected class under the federal law. And then in 1988, familial status, which means whether or not there are children under the age of 18 in the home, is an individual pregnant in the household, or trying to get custody of children or adopt children under the age of 18. So that's kind of the global definition of familial status. And then disability was also added in 1988 as a protected class on the federal level. And then in the state of California, there are all of those protected classes that we just talked about, and then there are some additional protections as well. I do want to note that 5 years before the federal government had its Fair Housing Act, the state of California had housing protections against discrimination. So those again are race, color, religion, national origin, gender, sex. Marital status was actually a protected class identified in 1976. Then there's familial status, disability, and then the additional protections for the state of California include sexual orientation and source of income, age, sex, which is expanded to include transgender individuals, medical condition and genetic information, gender, gender identity, and gender expression. And then I did want to highlight that the source of income protections were expanded this year in 2020 to include subsidies and public housing, like housing choice vouchers, Section 8 voucher protection. And so that is an expansion that had occurred locally, and now it's on the statewide level. So very quickly, these are the protected classes all in one slide. I am often asked, what does other arbitrary status mean under the California protections? And what that can mean is really, maybe there's a discrimination that's occurring where the protection has not yet been defined by law, but it is something that is arbitrary and identifiable. So that might be, someone's discriminating based on being a veteran or being a victim of domestic violence. Prior to 1999, it would have been maybe discrimination based on sexual orientation, because sexual orientation had not yet been identified under the law. So that's just an example of what that might mean under the law. So what is not fair housing? Affordability issues are not fair housing issues. So the fact that we have a lack of affordable housing within the city of San Diego is not necessarily a fair housing issue unless it's disproportionately impacting a protected class. And then the same with landlord-tenant issues. So-and-so, my landlord isn't fixing my dishwasher, or the roof is leaking. Those are not fair housing issues unless, again, those disputes are based on a protected class. So if landlord A is providing repairs to a tenant of a specific religion, but refusing to provide improvements or repairs for a tenant of another religion, one might be able to make the argument that those disputes are based on a protected class. As far as the analysis of impediments itself, we undertook a year-long outreach and engagement effort over the course of the last year, and it was multifaceted within our community. We held 6 regional workshops within the region itself. 2 were within the city of San Diego, 1 in the southeastern area, and 1 in the City Heights community. In all honesty, these were not well attended, and I think that's why we developed a more multimedia approach after engaging in the community workshops. I think overall there are about 65 total participants in the workshops for all 6 efforts. So we did start an online outreach campaign to really encourage individuals to take the survey that had been released. The survey was available for about 3 to 4 months. It was available in multiple languages, including Spanish, Tagalog, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Arabic. There were over 1,000 responses to this survey, which is 3 times more than we received the last analysis of impediments effort. And so we were pleased with those results, and we think, again, that was a result of a pretty big push on social media to receive responses. There were also 9 stakeholder interviews, so the consultant team worked with organizations like Legal Aid and CSA County, San Diego, San Diego Housing Commission, the San Diego Housing Federation, the Realtors Association, to get input on some of the barriers that they've identified to fair housing in the community. And as a result of the survey, the workshops, the stakeholder interviews, and even presentations to CBAP over the last year, we did kind of come up with some recurring themes, and those recurring themes are addressed in the analysis of impediments. So some of the regional findings, the most common fair housing complaints in our community are related to disability. Over 53% of all cases in the county are as a result of discrimination based on refusal to make a reasonable accommodation or a reasonable modification to housing due to disability. So an accommodation is a change in a policy. A modification is a change to the physical property or characteristics of the property. The next highest most common complaint was due to race, and then retaliation. Retaliation is when maybe a complaint has been made about the condition of a property or a practice, and then the landlord would retaliate against an individual for making that complaint or concern. And then the next would be familial status. That was about 9% of the complaints. And and sex was actually, for the city of San Diego, gender and sex discrimination was actually higher than the regional percentage. So in San Diego, it was disability, race, sex. For the county itself, it was disability, race, retaliation, familial status, and sex. Just for some other highlights, about 50% of the cases or complaints filed were deemed to have no cause, and then another 28% of the cases that were filed or complaints that were made were conciliated or settled. So they were mediated. They did not go to litigation. Some of the other regional findings, these are the main. This is the main meat of the analysis of impediments. So what were the findings, where are the areas of concern, and what can we as a city do in order to address those barriers? And there were, I believe, 8 identified. The first is lending and credit counseling. This is a recurring theme for our region. So throughout the city of San Diego and the county itself, Hispanics and Blacks do continue to be underrepresented in the home buyer market, and they experience large disparities in loan approval rates. Primarily Hispanics are underrepresented in home ownership and mortgage applications. Hispanics and Blacks, regardless of their income, are underrepresented in mortgage loan approvals. And so some of the actions that were recommended for the county is to coordinate with the city-county reinvestment task force. The city itself, we don't issue bank loans. We don't advertise for mortgage loan applications, but there is a city-county reinvestment task force that is made up of bankers within our community and city leaders. And so the recommendation is that the county and city jurisdictions participate more aggressively with this task force to identify community development activities in order to change this pattern of lending and credit counseling in our region. The next finding is an overconcentration of housing vouchers or housing choice vouchers, Section 8 vouchers in the region. We're noticing that primarily this occurs in El Cajon and National City. So those two cities have a much higher percentage of Section 8 voucher users than throughout the region itself. There is also a small concentration of voucher users in the kind of the downtown south Barrio Logan, San Ysidro, downtown area of the city of San Diego. But it really is a significant overconcentration in El Cajon and National City. And so some of the recommendations there is that we continue to expand our affordable housing inventory region-wide, that we promote housing choice voucher programs to rental property owners to encourage property owners to participate in that program, and then also increase education regarding the source of income protections. What we've seen in the past is ads for rental apartments that would say, no Section 8. That's now a violation of both local and state law. And so we are anticipating over the next year or so, this overconcentration will be reduced because of those protections. The next impediment is housing options. Over 20% of households on the waiting list for public housing and housing choice vouchers do include a household member with a disability, and the housing choices for special needs groups are limited. And so some of the actions recommended here are to amend zoning codes to address new state laws, encourage universal design principles in design and development, educate city and county building and planning staff on the accessibility requirements under the law. And then one of the other recommendations was for cities and the county to consider offering more housing rehabilitation and accessibility programs. That was something that throughout the research, our consultant did mention that she was surprised at how few of the jurisdictions within our region are continuing to offer these programs. They're expensive to run, and they're kind of first on the chopping block when our budgets are cut. But it is something that if we want to consider for the future, it's an eligible CDBG expense, it's an eligible home investment partnerships expense, is to consider offering these housing rehab programs in the future. So that's just something for the CPAB to consider in the long run. And then enforcement. I don't think this is as big of a concern with the city of San Diego because we have a service provider in Legal Aid Society of San Diego where they have attorneys on staff, and they're very active in their enforcement activities. But I think regionally, our enforcement activities are insufficient. And so the recommendation here is that there be a greater push to engage organizations and service providers that have the ability to not only educate but enforce, encourage victims to pursue litigation, and then also to publicize favorable litigation outcomes so that others will be encouraged to come forward. If you'll remember a few slides earlier, there was the highest level of complaint, or one of the higher levels or more common violations was retaliation. And that's always a concern for individuals when they are considering filing a complaint based on a protected class, because there's a fear that they'll be retaliated against. And when we're in a housing market that is as tight as it is, the fact of losing your home or staying quiet and not complaining, it's a real choice that folks are having to make. The other findings are related to outreach and education. I think as we saw, as I mentioned, the traditional let's have a community meeting and talk about this was not quite adequate to meet the diverse needs of our community. And I think now that we've been forced to participate in virtual conversations, we're realizing that this is definitely an option for us in the future. So some of the actions that we'll be considering as a region is to include multimedia campaigns and also utilizing existing networks of neighborhood groups and organizations to kind of piggyback on some of the publicity that those organizations already have. And then racial segregation is another finding. There are racially and ethnically concentrated areas of poverty throughout the county. So again, to diversify and expand the housing stock to accommodate varied housing needs. And then linguistic isolation was also identified. Over 15% of residents indicate they speak English less than very well. So the actions there are to promote equal access to information, translation, interpretation services, and then also update language access plans to reflect demographic changes. With the census coming out in the near future, we will be looking to update our language access plans. The languages that I mentioned earlier are identified based on the percentage of our population that speak those languages. So as our demographics change, so might our needs as far as translation and interpretation. And then the last finding is related to public policies. And excuse me for a moment, I'm going to cough. Some of the land use policies that were identified, there have been several changes to California state law, and many of the jurisdictions within the region have yet to update their housing elements or their land development codes in order to incorporate those changes. So the recommendation is to continue to monitor any new changes that are happening at a state level and to amend our public policies accordingly. And so with that, our goal in the city is to have a fair housing program that emphasizes solutions through education and enforcement. We do have a hotline for individuals who feel like they are experiencing discrimination in housing to call. It is staffed by the Legal Aid Society of San Diego's Fair Housing Center, and the number's here on the slide. Individuals would speak with a counselor. They would be referred to legal services if that's merited. They're provided assistance to resolve their complaints, and then any other unresolved complaints can be litigated. We also have calendars of events. We provide trainings. The city participates in an annual conference for fair housing, and we usually have several training opportunities throughout the year for nonprofit organizations, for tenants, landlords, property managers, etc. So with regard to the analysis of impediments itself, we did have a public comment period for 30 days, June 4th through July 4th. It's been, the document has been available online through that time frame. We received no written comments in the city of San Diego. And again, this is a document that's available for public comment in the county as well as all other 17 jurisdictions throughout the region, and there might be varying comment periods. But ours for the city of San Diego was June 4th through July 4th. We did receive some verbal comments that the document did not address or discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was because it was drafted prior to March. And so in response to those verbal comments, we are going to be adding an appendix that addresses how each of the jurisdictions are identifying programs that contribute to housing opportunities during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that appendix will be added to the document before it is finalized. And the next steps are the jurisdictions within the region are taking the document to their legislative bodies. At the city of San Diego, we plan to take that to the city council for approval. Either July 28th or August 4th is the dates. Those are the dates that we are targeting. Other jurisdictions have already received approval of their city councils, and some are pending this month and next. After we have all of the approvals of the legislative bodies, there's an acknowledgement signed, and then the document is not required to be submitted to HUD, but as a region we choose to do so, so they are aware of our activities. And then we measure our progress towards the goals that we've identified and the actions that we've identified when we submit our annual Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Reports, or CAPERs. So that's the report that we submit to HUD on an annual basis that gives HUD a description of our activities, how we've spent all of our funds, and then there is always a section that's related to fair housing. What have we done as a city to address the barriers that are identified in this document? And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and I'd like to ask that the board recommend approval of the document for City Council to consider.
Okay, I think we're open for discussion now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. If anybody has any comments, you can unmute yourself and make them.
Yeah, this is Rich. You guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Rich.
I've been with you. I just couldn't get on the other side.
That's okay. I saw you.
Well, a nice presentation, Michelle. This was a wonderful accumulation of a body of work. I was impressed with it. A lot of people I can tell put awful lot of work in it, and it was just super educational. But what's troubling always is the 10-year waiting period for housing, the subprime lending practices, the level of discrimination, and some things just seem to never change. So it looks to me, based on this report, we are making some changes, especially in San Diego, and I really appreciate that, and I appreciate the work you guys have all put into this. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. This is something I would definitely recommend to the council myself. So thank you.
Rich, are you making the motion?
I didn't want to jump ahead of somebody on that. I just said that I would support it. I didn't want to do that. No. Okay. Somebody else might want to make that motion.
Let's see if anybody else has any comments, and then we'll come back to that. Does anyone want to raise a hand and make a comment, or just make a comment? I see no comments. So it does look like a great piece of work, and I guess we can proceed to motions if there's nobody else has any comments. Would anyone like to make a motion to comply as staff recommends?
I would. Rich would.
Okay, and then I think Eileen is a second. Great. Then we will take a vote, and I will call on your name, and you will respond out loud with yay, nay, or abstain. Rich Thiesing?
Yes.
I believe still absent. Eileen Gonzalez?
Yay.
Yay. Victoria Barba?
Yay.
Brenda Campbell? I'm looking for her hand again. I don't see one, but there it is. Got it. Brenda says yeah, yay. Patrick Batten,
Yay.
and my vote is yay. And then I believe
Thank you. We'll let you know when it's finally docketed for City Council, so you'll be aware of when it goes to City Council for approval.
Okay, I think we have a discussion item, which is an update on our Federal CARES Act grants, and I believe that Leo will present the discussion item. There's no vote needed after this discussion is completed.
That's correct. While I set this up, if we can go back to the minutes now that Rich is here and just do a re-vote on that, just so they can, because it's a quorum and I could officially post them.
Do you want us all to vote again, or just Rich?
Just
okay.
The motion and the second, and then if Rich can
okay,
put his
sure.
vote in.
We will go back to the approval of our virtual meeting minutes on May 13th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Eileen makes that motion, and can I second it?
Yes.
Okay, sure. I will second the motion. I'll now take a vote and call on your name, and you'll respond out loud with yay, nay, or abstain. Or if you are Brenda, you will raise your hand. Rich Thiesing.
Yay.
Sarah Burns, absent. Eileen Gonzalez.
Yay.
Victoria Barba.
Yay.
Brenda Campbell. Hand up. And Patrick Batten.
Yay. Sorry,
And
trouble here.
and my vote is yay, so the minutes are approved again,
Okay.
formally.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. All right. So yeah, this is a quick just discussion item because there's a lot of talk of the CARES Act and what our involvement is and how much we specifically are receiving in our department and in our division. So again, Leonardo Alarcon, Community Development Project Specialist, and we're gonna just talk about some of the CARES Act updates. So on April 9th, the president signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Securities Act, better known as the CARES Act, in response to the COVID-19. The pandemic was declared an emergency at the national, state, and local levels, and funding would need to be expedited. So the HUD CARES Act funding was part of the overall funding for the city of San Diego that the city received. The city received over $250 million in CARES Act funding. All funding must be related to COVID-19 related activities. So for the purposes of CPAB related activities, when we refer to the CARES Act funding, it will primarily be referencing CDBG, ESG, and possibly the HOME grant. Currently, HOME did not receive additional funding as part of the original CARES Act allocation, but may receive funding in the future. So the CARES Act provided additional funding for CDBG, ESG, and HOPWA. A number of the waivers increasing the flexibility of funds included eliminating the 15% cap on public service activities, an expedited public comment period of 5 days, and the extension of deadlines to submit the fiscal year 21 annual action plan and the fiscal year 2020 CAPER. The original CARES Act funding related to HUD programs was close to $11 million, as you can see there. The second allocation, we just received a second allocation of $22 million for the city for the ESG program. So typically, the ESG program is allocated only about $1 million a year. So this substantial increase will lead to we'll need some time to allocate the funding strategically. So some CDBG funding has already been allocated to COVID-19 related activities. The Small Business Relief Fund, the SBRF, was originally funded at $6.1 million, but was allocated an additional $12.8 in CARES Act funding, making the total for the SBRF over $20 million. The SBRF has a number of funding sources, including the former enterprise zone, a revolving loan fund, private donations, the CARES Act, and CDBG. For CDBG, a fiscal year 2020 activity was canceled, and the funds were put into the SBRF, which was about $3.3 million. And additionally, going back to the Small Business Relief Fund, as of July 14th, the SBRF has awarded 804 businesses and dispersed over $7 million of the funding. City staff will be providing updates to City Council as they become available. Also, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program was recently approved by City Council and currently has a total of $15 million going into the program, with a total of about $5.4 million from CDBG CARES Act and the FY21 CDBG allocation going into the program. And then so finally, what kind of is relevant to what the CPAB does is that, and some of these items were mentioned at last month's meeting, but with all of the additional funding, a lot of these deadlines have been pushed back. And so there's a number of items currently being worked on at various levels. So many of the items the CPAB usually begin to work on at this time of year. So for example, we usually start our new scoring criteria around in the summertime, but yeah, right now that's on hold. So basically all the timelines and the deadlines have been changed because of this unprecedented time. As information becomes available, we will definitely communicate with the board on the different updates. So that's it for right now. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of the different CARES Act funding that's going on right now.
Thank you for that presentation. Did anybody have any questions or comments for Leo? Hearing none, I think our meeting is adjourned. City staff will provide updates for the next virtual meeting.
That is correct.
When you're ready, or when you have one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. As soon as we have one, we'll definitely give you guys advance notice.